Rare Together is all about bringing together people from across the world to unite them in what makes them unique, being rare together. But that means that a lot of our participants are dialing in from different countries and with variable internet connections. So occasionally, the audio quality might drop a little in this episode. If that happens, we do apologise in advance, but rest assured that anything you need to know, you'll find in the episode description. Hello and welcome to Rare Together, a new regular podcast series from LDA Research that explores what it's really like to live with a rare disease. I'm your host, Andrew Grant, and for this episode, I'm delighted to say that we have two guests who have very kindly agreed to share their thoughts with us. Now, they've both been diagnosed with different conditions, but they do have one thing in common, and that is that not only do they suffer from a rare disease, but they have multiple other conditions to contend with as well. So let me introduce them. Firstly, we have Millie from Bel Air in Texas. Hello, Millie. How are you today?
Fine, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for joining us. Much appreciated. And then we have Liz, who's joining us from Cardiff in the UK. Hello, Liz. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Good to be here.
Good. Thanks very much for joining us. So welcome, both of you, and thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. It's very much appreciated. So I'm going to start with you, Liz. I wonder if you wouldn't mind just giving us a brief introduction. Tell us a little bit about your home situation, and then tell us about the conditions that you suffer from and how they affect you, please.
Okay, well, I'm Liz, and I live in a rural area not far from Cardiff in South Wales with my husband and our little dog, who's a Jack Chi. And I've only come across these rare diseases in the last couple of years. My health has deteriorated quite quickly. I was fortunately diagnosed recently with a rare form of Scleroderma. And Scleroderma in itself was quite rare. So to have a rare form of that is, very special. And that's caused at least two other rare diseases in my body, which particularly affect my lungs. So I'm largely housebound at the moment, very dependent on my husband and my sister who lives nearby to take me to medical appointments. And that's largely been the only places that I've been going, just beginning to venture out a little more for very short trips, but I have very low energy levels and have to conserve my strength.
Right, understood. So you said it caused various other conditions. So tell me a little bit about that.
So it was my lungs that really triggered the alarm bells. I was already seeing a rheumatologist, and as for many people, the scleroderma wasn't showing definitively in the blood test, and so they kept trying to look for other things, explanations, but my lung function was deteriorating. And then when they did a CT scan, they realised I had bronchiectasis and bronchiolitis obliterans, which people sometimes get from lung transplants or from vaping or from chemicals, but you can get it from an autoimmune disease. So unfortunately, treatment for both can be similar. So they quickly put us on treatment. But also it's very much affected my GI tract. So my swallowing has largely gone. I can only swallow water now. I've got a peg. So all my nutrition and medication go down a tube into my small bowel now. So that's been quite a life change. I was quite a foodie and used to cook all the time. So that's difficult because I've got no taste anymore. Everything tastes horrible. So that's another thing I've had to adapt to. Lots of changes in the last 18 months.
Right, yeah, very drastic changes by the sound of it. Thanks for that, Liz. We'll come back to some of those things in a sec. But Millie, perhaps you could do the same. Introduce yourself, please, and tell us about your situation.
Sure. I also live at home with my husband and little dog, who's a Beagle Dachshund mix. And I think our little dogs provide us good company. But I also have a son who's 28 years old. He's grown and working. I suddenly started having health issues related to my rare diseases quite a while ago, around the age of 30. I'm 57 now. And it started with what seemed to be kind of like a really bad virus, essentially. I already had issues just growing up. I was a preemie. I had severe scoliosis. So I had my first scoliosis reconstruction at age 17. I was born with club feet. So I had a number of different issues just from the get-go, but things kind of escalated around age 30. Like I said, began with sort of viral symptoms and couldn't walk well. My legs became very stiff, which I later found out was what's referred to as spasticity. The spasticity seemed to, instead of getting better as I got well from whatever virus seemed to have hit me, the spasticity progressed rather rapidly. So I had what is referred to by my neurologist at Bel Air as spastic quadriparesis. I was originally misdiagnosed with multiple sclerosis. I was on MS modifier drugs for a few years before it was found to know I don't have MS. I have some other cause of spastic quadriparesis. I use a rollator walker to ambulate around for longer distances, short distances, such as around the house. I can cope with fine without. It's just that things tend to cramp up, and make it difficult to walk. And the spasticity has spread to higher. So, for instance, if I yawn or cough or sneeze, I get muscle spasms in my back, in my chest, my arms, things like that. So there are things that kind of comorbidities that go along with, I'm sure, as you're aware, of neuromuscular diseases such as what's happened to me, which is where I've developed dysautonomia. And dysautonomia is a huge challenge in itself. My cardiologist and neurologist that helped me cope with the dysautonomia, which also has a heart arrhythmia component to it. So I'm on heart arrhythmia medicine now. They see a lot of neuromuscular patients that develop dysautonomia, many Parkinson's patients, patients with some cerebral palsy sometimes get it. So it's kind of with the scoliosis reconstructions, because I had a recent one in 2021, the entire spine reconstructed in New York, and then the dysautonomia and the spastic quadriparesis. So there's never a dull moment, as I'm sure Liz understands.
Right, yeah, that's quite some list. Yeah. So, what's interesting to me is that it seems like a lot of the conditions that you have are they're caused by each other. So they're spin-offs from. But it also strikes me that in some cases, presumably, there are other conditions which are purely perhaps coincidental. Is that right? I mean, is that the case for you, Liz? That you have other conditions which you just happen to have, but are nothing to do with your main conditions?
I think it's one of the things that they don't really know.
Okay.
There are things that can predispose people maybe to getting scleroderma, but nobody really knows the cause. And I think that's true of a lot of autoimmune diseases, from the things that I've been reading in the last 2 years while I've been investigating, as it were. And one of the things that I've said to the gastro specialists, particularly, is that I've lived all my adult life managing food intolerances and IBS. I wonder whether that is something that perhaps predisposed me to it, because it's now whole of my GI tract isn't working. So I wonder whether somehow that was a trigger. But I don't think this, because it's a rare disease, it's difficult for them to get enough people together to really analyse why and where it comes from. I think they're still investigating and still working it out. But so many of these things, they don't really know, do they? It's like, we've got to keep working it out. And it's so complicated because it's different for every person. And so I think that's really hard for the healthcare professionals, is what they may have only met one or two other patients with your disease, if that. And they might have symptoms that manifest very differently in their lives. And so they think, oh, well, it just doesn't seem like scleroderma then. Because that's what they kept saying to me was, you haven't got the bit in the hands that people have, you haven't got the bit in your face that some people have, but I've got the internal bits.
Right,
so I think it's difficult to work out what's going on and what triggers what.
Yeah, well, right. I mean, a classic example is what Millie just said. I just want to come back to you, Millie, because you mentioned that for several years you were being treated for MS, but you didn't have MS.
That's correct. And just like what Liz was verbalizing, so much the same route that has happened with me. Just not knowing, just not knowing. I've had workups for many genetic diseases such as hereditary spastic paraplegia. There are things that the neurologists say it looks exactly as something, but then the tests come back negative. I've been on a baclofen pump, internal pump that feeds medication into my spine, into the spine so that I can walk. Without the pump, I don't believe I'd be walking at all. My first one I had in 2004, and I've had 5 pumps since then. And again, with this complicated and as quickly as the spasticity has progressed, it's alarming and stressful to be rare and to not be able to be identified and know what's going to happen next. Because again, as Liz mentioned, so many things fall into after that. Also, like her, I've had stomach issues related to the dysautonomia where I couldn't eat for weeks at a time. I had a mild stroke in 2019 that we don't know if it's related to all this other neuromuscular things that are going on. It's just a lot of unknown, and it's scary.
Of course. Yes, I can completely understand that. One thing I wanted to ask was about, obviously with multiple conditions, you're receiving multiple medications, I assume. So I'll come back to you, Liz. I mean, what are the issues around having so many different medications? Do they interact with each other? Are there problems around that?
So actually, I'm not on that much as far as some of the patients that I deal with. I work in a neuro-ophthalmology setting. By the way, part-time, 15 hours a week is about all I can tolerate, but just to keep things up. But I see, of course, we have many patients that come in with a list of 12 or 15 medications, and I'm on maybe 3 or 4. I have my internal pump. I have the heart arrhythmia medicine that I take for the inappropriate sinus tachycardia, which is what it's referred to as with the dysautonomia. So I am on a heart medicine. It's a heart failure medicine, but it's very effective for this type of cardiogenic dysautonomia. And then the rest is allergy medicine. I don't take anything for pain, even though it's a painful condition. And I was on gabapentin before my last spinal reconstruction in 2021, but my spinal reconstruction for the severe scoliosis was quite successful, thank God. And I am off of gabapentin since then. So it's just the baclofen pump to help me walk and the heart medication and allergy medicine. I do have multiple allergies to many antibiotics. And when I had my spine reconstruction, I had liver failure from anaphylaxis from antibiotics.
If you or someone you know is affected by a rare disease diagnosis, I'd like to take a moment to point you in the direction of the Rare Disease Network. It's a private support group on Facebook where we bring together people with all sorts of rare diseases from all over the world. You'll find exclusive research and insight. You'll get the chance to ask your questions to leading medical professionals. and you'll hear some engaging and inspirational stories from our growing community. There's a link to the group in the episode note below. We'd love to see you there. Okay, so in a way, it's fortunate that you only have a few medications then. Yeah. What about you, Liz? Tell me about your regime.
I try to take as few as possible.
Okay.
So I'm on an immunosuppressant, which treats both the bronchiolitis obliterans and the scleroderma. When I say treat, it stays the progression. It's not a cure. They're all incurable. Present. But they are trying to reduce the amount that I'm taking now, as my lung function hadn't deteriorated after 6 months, which was a good sign because it had deteriorated quite fast before that. So they're now trying to reduce it, which is good because there's lots of nasty side effects. And I'm on a high dose of steroids as well, which again, we're reducing. So apart from that, like Millie, I'm on antihistamine for allergies. And I do take paracetamol. I try not to take strong painkillers because of my gut system, antibiotics, and everything else will give me diarrhea or real problems. So I try to avoid, but sometimes you have to because I'm very prone to infection. And therefore I've got to protect myself. And for that is antibiotics. So I do take a probiotic as well. So my biggest problem with medicines is getting them in liquid form.
Right.
That I can get down my tube, and also the volume. Before, I used to have one of those tubes that went up your nose and then back at your throat when I came out of hospital. And I got used to the fact that when you flushed between medicines, you could put an unlimited amount of water in your stomach because your stomach is very flexible and big. But now the tube is inside and it's going into my small bowel. That's much smaller. And nobody really explained to me beforehand that it would be an issue. But I could only get a small amount of liquid in it at a time. So I can only flush small splashes between the medicines. So for me, it's another incentive to have as few medicines as possible because it's going to be quite stressful.
Yeah. Okay. Now that's an interesting point. Yes, of course you have to take that into account. As well as multiple medicines, given you have multiple conditions, does that mean that you also have to see multiple specialists? I'll start with you again, Liz.
Yes. multiple. I think at the last count it was 15 healthcare professionals that were trying to help me. And
Wow.
I think it's really difficult for them working together, and they're so busy. I think they've done amazingly well. I hear on the grapevine that rare diseases can take years and years to be diagnosed. So for me to be diagnosed within 2 years is actually a win-win. I mean, they're still going through the diagnosis. There are still other unknowns, and it might be I've got some others or some other things going on. But at least we've got the probable root cause, and we're dealing with that. But I do find it's really hard for departments to work together. I think that must be true, I would think, in the USA as well. But certainly here it's difficult, and it's difficult here between Wales and England sometimes. I had my rheumatologist managed to get me an appointment with probably the country's leading expert from the Royal Free when he came to Cardiff a month or two ago, and he's the one that confirmed my diagnosis. So I'm very grateful for that. But I think I've been very lucky there. A lot of other people haven't had somebody who's been so determined to get to the bottom of it as my rheumatologist has been.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting point. Yeah, it's very important to actually have a confirmed diagnosis, isn't it, in order to be able to, start the treatment regime. What's your experience with? Do you have multiple healthcare professionals looking after you, Millie?
Yes, absolutely. So the cardiology, of course, for the heart arrhythmia, neurology for the spastic quadriparesis, infectious disease for the multiple drug allergy issues, urology for spastic bladder, because when you're spastic, all your muscles are affected, just everywhere. So you get spasms, everywhere. Pulmonology, because it affects breathing as well, just like with Liz. So I do have a little bit diminished pulmonary function. But first, we were hopeful that the scoliosis reconstruction would help some of the pulmonology function, but I'm about the same as I was before spine surgery. And then the scoliosis specialist in New York that we traveled to see got him. So yeah, you have a bag of a lot of different names, and it is very difficult in the U.S. with getting enough chair time, I guess I would say, with professionals, because insurance dictates a lot as far as time and testing and things like that, approving. I know for my heart medicine, for instance, because it's a heart failure drug, it was denied by my insurance multiple times. And my cardiologist had to have a peer review with them in order to explain why the mechanism of the medication was necessary for my particular type of arrhythmia, because it's a rare arrhythmia associated, with neuromuscular issues. So it's a lot it's a full-time job, coordinate everything. Truly.
I can imagine. Yeah, I can imagine. And do you sometimes find, given all of those different healthcare professionals, do you sometimes find that they give you conflicting advice? Not intentionally, but
That's a good question. Honestly, not that I can recall that I've really had any conflicting advice. They do work together pretty well, thank goodness, for EMRs these days, where you can pull up all the information of all the testing and hospitalizations and everything. That's been tremendous, because I can't imagine navigating the different professionals navigating all of this and coordinating care with just a paper chart,
Sure.
to go by.
Sure. What about you, Liz? Have you experienced any conflicting advice with different healthcare professionals, or does that not come up?
It's not been too bad, really. It's just been the time lag sometimes between when I've been referred by one specialist to another.
Right.
So it takes a while, and then they want to wait to get that before the next decision. So the delay is more. I think one of the things that's been very helpful for me is that my local hospital, they have like a joint rheumatology and respiratory clinic, which has been very helpful for me because I'm on both sides, as it were. And I'm also on a list to go to an ENT and the speech and language, the swallowing team. They have a joint clinic every few months as well. So I will be going to that. And I think the idea of having joint clinics is good, because it's when your condition is affecting different parts of your body that are covered by different specialists. It's really good if they're in a room together and talk it through. And I think that's what prompted me being taken into hospital at the end of last year and sort of really dealing with my condition, was the fact that it was a joint clinic between the two specialties. And together they said, well, we think it's the best course of action for you. What do you think? And they worked it out together, both my medication and taking me into hospital.
Okay. So that process worked for you. That's great. I want to change subject a little bit now. Let's step away from the healthcare professionals. Tell me how your condition, or conditions, should I say, have affected the people around you. Your family and friends, etc. Let me start with Millie.
Well, it affects your peripheral family and friends a lot. It It's interesting that just a few days ago on one of the little support blogs that I sometimes type in on, I saw somebody wrote in about they feel badly that their husband has to do all the household chores, so much additional work and cooking and so forth. And I really felt that, of course. I'm saying it's really disheartening and sad to not be able to do more. I'm blessed that my husband's awesome and he never complains and happily helps with everything. But it's difficult. It's sad that I can't do more. I do the things I can do, such as dusting here and there, things like that, vacuuming. There's no way I can push even the lightest weight vacuum. I've tried. It's just terrible for my back and my muscles. It causes everything to spasm.
Okay.
So, if I do something like that, if I force myself and do a task like that, even just one small room, then I know the next 2, 3, or 4 days I'm going to pay for it. I mean, I know I'll be in bed, honestly. So it affects your family in that respect, friends and doing activities. I know if I plan one activity for the day, then that needs to be it. It's difficult because, so I go in 3 half days a week for clinic to help as an ophthalmology assistant. And so I work 4 hours, 3 days a week. All the other days, well, actually 3 days a week also, I'm in physical therapy. And it's a lot. It's an exhausting week, honestly. My coworkers help out a little bit. They'll go and retrieve a patient and bring them to my room, as opposed to maybe me having to walk all around clinic to find them. And so things like that. Everybody pitches in, which is, to help you, which is great. But you know what? Sometimes it's not a very nice feeling. You want to do it yourself. You lose quite a bit of independence with these issues.
Right. Yes, I can completely understand that. And I saw you nodding there, Liz, whilst Millie was talking. What, does that kind of resonate with you?
Very much so, yes. I think like Millie, I'm a very independent person, and probably the hardest thing for me was learning to ask people for help. I've always been a person that would offer rather than receive the help. And, I remember when a friend first visited and while she was sitting here, she said, "Well, what can I do when I'm here then? Just put the Hoover over for you." And I thought, "I'll have you." And then I felt bad. And she's bad, but and it was really nothing of her. And so I think, yes, like Millie, I'm very grateful for my husband. He works full time. I actually gave up my job a couple of months ago. It was only a few hours anyway, but even so, I was getting stressed by it. And my rheumatologist said, "Well, you've got to think about what you're getting out of it. Is it making you more stressed, or are you getting good things out of it?" And I had to be honest and think, well, really, no, it's causing a lot more stress, and I need to conserve that energy at the moment. So I haven't got that, but I'm doing quite a lot of stuff online. And I'm also very grateful for friends that come to visit, and at my church. I was very grateful because of lockdown. The church had been doing online services, and they've carried on doing that. So I've been able to join in the services even when I'm not going to the church building. And so that's been lovely. And also prayer meetings, a sort of small group meetings online. So I think that's been very helpful for me. Sorry, it will be my practice, so I'll let you say something.
Yes, I don't want to tire you out. So we're getting towards the end. I just wanted to kind of just explore for a second. Having so many things going wrong with your body, I'm putting words in your mouth, but I mean, do you sometimes feel, what's going to be next? I mean, is there an element of that? I mean, let's start with you, Millie.
Yes. But yes. You never know what surprise is awaiting for you around the corner. So I had a number of issues with not being one morning, not waking up, my husband having to leave work and come home because he has me to call in every morning to him at work. He leaves for work very early, to call in and just let him know that I'm up and about. When he didn't hear from me, thank God he came home and found me unresponsive. And I was barely breathing. He called the emergency services. I ended up, being on one of the instances in ICU on life support on a ventilator for a couple of days. I just was not breathing effectively on my own. We don't know if it was the neuromuscular issues causing it, if it was at that time that they identified, a small stroke. They don't know, was it the baclofen pump that could be issues? And at one of the, instances, we did find, too much was infiltrated into me. And of course you're unresponsive, so you can't answer questions at the hospital. So a lot of tests are done, toxicity medicines to find out that, okay, everything is fine there. Let's go to the next step. But, so as far as your question, do you worry what's going to happen next? That's always in the back of my mind. So I worry for sure when I go to bed at night, am I going to wake up in the morning? Is everything going to be okay? And that's probably my biggest worry, that and then just the progression of the spasticity without a firm diagnosis of, okay, what's causing the spastic, quadriparesis.
Right. Understood. Yes, that must be very scary. Understood. What about you, Liz? Does that resonate with you?
It does. I think I try not to think about it too much. I think at the beginning, when I first learned that I had an incurable disease, when they diagnosed the bronchiolitis obliterans, and I sort of looked online and it said 3 to 5 months to live. And I thought, but obviously that's just a statistic, and I'm still here.
Right.
But I think you're bound to think of the gloomy side then, aren't you? But I think that as I've got used to the idea that I have an incurable disease or 3 or more, I've come to realise that every person is different. And I want to make the best of every day that I've got. And I think you've got to stay positive. If you start thinking about all the things that could happen, it's very depressing.
Yes.
And they may not happen. So don't worry about things that may not happen. It's almost like you need to be prepared for the unexpected to happen, but don't live expecting it to happen all the time. Your mental health is kind of way down.
Right. Okay, that's a great attitude. How do you stay positive, Millie?
I enjoy my work, the little bit that I go in and do, and enjoy family time quite a lot. I try to stay busy and upbeat, and spend time with the dog and watching him run around. That's been a positive. So you just look for the things that make you smile best you can, and just like Liz said, definitely focus on the things that you can do, and focus on the things that you look forward to. And I keep a little day timer in my purse with all of the things that I have mapped out, whether it's coffee with a friend that day or go to a new ice cream shop. There's always something that is helpful in the bright sun.
And you've got to be kind to yourself, haven't you, as well? Yeah, I think I've always been somebody that's had lists and wanted to get things done, and I've got to get these 6 things done this day. And it's learning that actually it doesn't all have to be done that day. You can wait until I've got the energy to do it. So, don't put myself under unnecessary pressure. It's self-imposed. It's not necessary.
Very, very true. You definitely do have to change your mindset in that respect if you're that type of personality. And I was, for sure.
Well, that's really interesting. Thank you both, and also a couple of good positive notes to end on, which is great. So I think that just about wraps it up. It's been an absolutely fascinating conversation. Thank you both for sharing your experiences so openly. I really, really do appreciate that. To the audience, if you've enjoyed this podcast, please let us know. Tell us your thoughts about what you've heard in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to subscribe to these podcasts to make sure that you don't miss out. And if you know anyone else who might like to join the conversation, please do send them the link. You can also join the conversation on our Facebook group, which is called the Rare Disease Network. So all that remains for me to say is to Liz and to Millie, thank you so much for sharing with us those fascinating insights. It's really been lovely to talk to you, and I wish you both the best with your conditions, and I hope that they only improve.